Would you like to draw out a picture of the actual war? If we hypothetically take a time machine and go back to around 15,000 BC when that war was happening, what did it look like? How many people were participating? What
Right,
is the
right.
visual of the war field? Why do Ravan's sons have those kind of powers in the first place? What is actually trying to be said from a human history perspective?
So the Yuddha Kand, the final war between the Vanar Sena and Sri Ram and Lakshman against the Rakshasas. This war was very different from, let's say, what we may know of in the Mahabharata. In this war, there were no rules. So it was fought day and night, whatever it takes. The Vanaras surrounded the city, encircled the city on all sides, filled up the moat. There was a protective moat around the city and charged. And they charged with their with rocks, tree trunks, whatever they could find to break down the doors and attack. The Rakshasas came out of the city to protect it, and it was soon a man to man combat. So there are descriptions of a Vanar sitting on top of a Rakshas, and these are detailed descriptions, sitting on top of Vanar, grabbing his head, twisting it, twisting the neck, and yanking it off. There were many, many casualties, by the way, on both sides. Even before the war, Ram had made this observation. He said, for one person's mistake, this is going to be a terrible war. And Valmiki describes, dead bodies and blood, that because of the fighting, the dust had been kicked up, right? And you could hardly see. And after a while, the dust settled down because of all the blood. And what emerged was a picture of limbs and dead bodies and so on. There were millions upon millions of Vanaras, according to the description. Now, there could be some exaggeration in this, but it was a very intense war without a stop, practically. Of course, when both sides were, tired or to regroup, they would go back a little bit and attack again.
Which side was bigger?
In terms of the numbers, both sides were had huge numbers at hand. The Rakshasas were better equipped because they had all the arms which the Vanaras didn't have.
How does the war pan out?
Ravan suffers one loss after another amongst his top generals. Of course, there are times when the Vanaras also have a setback, like the time when Indrajit's arrows injure many of them. And of course, there is the famous episode of Ram and Lakshman lying injured because of Indrajit's arrows. So there is one interesting point where on the first day of war, Indrajit injures Ram and Lakshman, and he thinks that he has won the war, that they are dead. And he goes back and tells Ravan that they are dead. And he embraces him, thinking that the war is over on the first day itself. But overall, Ravan continues to lose one general after another. Finally, he calls on Kumbhakarna, his brother, Indrajit, his son, and in the end, he goes himself as well.
What is said about him as a warrior?
He was a great warrior, no doubt. So was Indrajit, by the way, who had won over Indra. That is why the name Indrajit. Ram and Ravan's battle is also described in detail. And in the end, the arrow that takes down Ravan, finally, is described as, you would almost think of it as a modern day missile, because the description is given that it had a hollow center. There was a fire burning through that hollow center, and it could blast through man, beast, or doors. And that is the one that hit Ravan, and it went right through him. And as his bow slipped, Valmiki says, even before he hit the ground, his life breath had also slipped out of him. It was so powerful.
What do you make of the weaponry after your studies?
Clearly, there is some technology, war technology, that has been lost over time. So we don't understand it. Some of it is possible to understand. For example, the description of the missile that I gave. Yes, you would say some sort of a chemical reaction which generates fire, and therefore the arrow zips forward and strikes. But there is also the war technology related to mantras, which we don't understand now. We can't recreate that.
That's clearly written in the Valmiki Ramayana
Yes.
that there was some element of.
Well, there are descriptions of them, using mantras to fire up weapons. So Vishwamitra taught Ram and Lakshman about a lot of weapon systems. And how they exactly work, we don't know.
But then what's written in the Valmiki Ramayana?
For example, there is a list of weapons, right? There's a long list. And I suppose that was clear for someone at that time what it meant. In fact, some of these weapons were also told that, all right, for that astra, there are two variants, the dry and the wet type. Okay. So it's a listing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just limited to the Vimanas, because that's what's made it to the West. The West knows about knowledge about the Vimanas.
Yeah.
But there's also chemical weapons, missiles.
Other technology which could have been lost over time.
Okay. What fascinated you?
And by the way, the Vimanas, you would have heard of the Pushpak Viman, but there was not only one Viman in Ravan's Lanka. Actually, there were multiple Vimans parked like a parking lot outside his palace. That's how it's described.
Okay. Yeah. What fascinated you the most amongst all this weaponry talk?
What fascinated me was that the Vanaras had nothing in terms of this weaponry. But what they did have was strength and courage. And they quickly overcame, from a war point of view, the Rakshasas had a strategic advantage that they were powerful from a distance, right? They had weapon systems. And all the Vanaras could do was throw things. They had to be close enough to do that. And the Rakshasas gave up this critical strategic advantage by not acting soon enough, allowing the Vanaras to come close.
Mike Tyson. You go in and destroy.